Hello again, orators. This is the second part of the lecture for week 3. All righty. So we covered brain laterality, brain dominance, how the right and the left must interact in the first segment. Now we're going to look at a little bit more that's outside of an individual, and we're going to be looking at those aspects that are relevant that you need to consider as you plan your presentation. So one of the really important things, and this is discussed in your eCampus handbook, and that's the rhetorical situation. And this is something that you would be familiar with, also hearing it just generally discussed, and that is the location, the physical location, the audience that you're considering, and the purpose that you're presenting as part of the planning package. So I gave an example during class. I'm not speaking to kindergarten students, so my presentation style is quite different when I'm speaking to young adults. There's a different level of expected maturity. I expect that you want, bing, bang, bang, you want some good value for your time invested, your students in business. So that's the context, the audience. I know the audience. You're not wasting time. You are curious in how this is going to benefit you. It's a mandatory elective. We went through that nonsense as well the other day. Purpose of the presentation, I'm hoping to provide you with some further insight on what it is that you read. Some people will skim through it, go through it at whatever speed works for you. But that is what you have to be thinking of, because rhetoric is the art of public speaking. Ethos, pathos, and logos, discussed in the handbook, discussed in the OER as well. And it ties back to this idea of rhetoric being effective, persuasive communication. All right, now it's used often quite negatively, but we're going to go with just the positive aspect right now, being a persuasive speaker. And if you look at that blue triangle there, well, you can see that you're also looking very much at how you can be effective in the world of business. You got to have ethos, that's your credibility factor. You have to be logical, that's logos. And you have to have pathos, you have to make a connection with your audience. And then, of course, the eCampus resource gives you a lot of extra details on how you accomplish these things. And we're going to be working on a lot of these as we go through the art of oratory. You'll notice under pathos, things like tone and emphasis. Those are how you're going to be able to engage your audience. The logos. Is it concise? Are you speaking to the bullet points that you have provided your audience? Are you delivering on what it is they're expecting to hear? Ethos is your credibility, does the audience believe that you are coming from a position of legitimacy? Are you able to actually speak to this in a knowledgeable way? In the handbook, you have this diagram, ethos, pathos, logos, and then Scully goes and explains it as well. All right, so now we've got this beautiful picture of Isaiah Mustafa. It's linked right through to the Old Spice commercial. And this is going to be an excellent example of rhetoric. I want you to pay attention to the context of the setting. I want you to pay attention. Is this something that is built on logic, or is this something that's built on emotional appeal? The setting will matter either way, but what's going to be the emphasis here?
Hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back at your man. Now back to me. Sadly, he isn't me. But if he stopped using lady-scented body wash and switched to Old Spice, he could smell like he's me. Look down. Back up. Where are you? You're on a boat. With the man, your man could smell it. What's in your hand? Back at me. I am. It's an oyster with 2 tickets to that thing you love. Look again. The tickets are now diamond. Anything is possible when your man smells like Old Spice and not a lady. I'm on a horse.
Okay, obviously not appealing to logic, appealing to a particular mindset, and it was a hugely successful campaign for Old Spice. And who were the primary purchasers? Well, interestingly enough, it was dominantly men who thought, well, if this is what's going to work, then this is what's going to work. Alrighty. So let's go back to the handbook. There are a few other important sections that were covered. We're going to look at swearing, the hero's journey, self-actualization yet. Swearing is a form of attention seeking, and it is very guttural, it's visceral, it has an instant reaction with people. It's a lot of taboo language, and it has changed over time what gets used as a swear word. It is something that involves sometimes reclaiming of language, and there's all sorts of aspects to it. It is definitely appealing to the right part of our brain, and you want to be very selective in how you use it. It can be really cathartic. Anybody who's ever stubbed their toe or accidentally dropped something on their hand might have let out a swear word, might have let out an expletive. It's a venting in those kinds of situations. It is absolutely part of communication, and you should be intentional. Steven Pinker writes about the value of swearing and how careful we have to be in our use of swearing because it can't be everywhere. Again, selective audiences. If you are working with elementary children, you're not going to use swear words. And if you are working with adults in, let's say, in a holy setting, again, you're going to be very careful with your choice of language. There are times where it is appropriate and where you want to punctuate and make emphasis by using particular language. It shouldn't be part of a formal presentation, but when you are past the formal presentation and you are talking for emphasis, talking to demonstrate something, then it might work again. The hero's journey. All right, so for the hero's journey, this is where we're starting to pull things together. The effective public speaker is not the hero. The effective public speaker is the one who tells us about the hero and what the hero is going through, the ups and downs of what the hero has to experience. It is the here it is, what is the reality, to here is what it could be. All right, that's your hero's journey. It's used in all sorts of situations. Not all stories are based on the hero's journey, but if you use this classic approach when you do your individual presentations, I'm going to encourage you to engage your audience because it is best when the hero doesn't get unstuck by themselves, because the hero wants to be sympathetic to the audience. The hero wants the audience to be engaged. So think about a pretty classic story like The Lion King. Simba doesn't figure out how to get unstuck by himself. He's got, Timon and Pumbaa who are there busy helping him just live his own life and not care about any responsibilities he might have. It's Nala who comes and says, hey, you know what? The pride really could use you. So in that way, Simba ends up getting unstuck. That's the block that Simba needs to overcome. There are others where we've got stories worked out, crossing a threshold, your classic stories going way back to a Zeus and a Hercules kind of a story, going into the future with something like a Star Wars as well. It's not every storyline, though. The hero's journey doesn't work for all, but if you choose to use that approach, you should be aware how important it is to create that ethos with your audience and to develop pathos and make the audience feel that you are an empathetic character. And how do you get to that level of speaking, that level of connection with your audience? Well, you have to accomplish these first three levels of Abraham Maslow's pyramid of needs. So once those three bottom levels, your physiological, your safety and security, and your love and belonging, those deficiency needs are met, then we can start thinking about the higher needs. And we get to self-esteem and self-actualization, and we can project very differently. So this is where, what's going to motivate us? This is the motivational pyramid. Public speaking begins here on this third level, love and belonging. If you're worried about your safety and security, you can't be an effective public speaker. If you don't have your basic needs for life, your food, water, shelter, clothing, you cannot be an effective presenter. But as you go through this, you also want to figure out, how is my presentation going to matter for an audience? And that brings us right here to Julian Treasure, who's done some spectacular really, really impressive TED Talks and all sorts of videos that you can find about Julian Treasure. This is a link I will share with the class later on about listening and how we become better listeners. And when we're better listeners, we become better presenters. And I want to say one of the most important parts in this little talk that he does is with this acronym RASA: receive, appreciate, summarize, and ask. And anybody who's ever been a student, such as all of you, knows you got to hear the message that's coming in. You'll make your own synopsis, and hopefully there's an appreciation for the effort that's been put into it, and then you'll ask for clarity when you don't understand something. Asking for clarity, well, what if you don't get what's written in the open educational resource and in the handbook? Well, there are some PDFs posted for you on the Prof. Judy website under that additional documents folder. I encourage you to use them. If you take a look over here, there's an explanation how you do extemporaneous speaking. And that is so that you can wing it, but you've still got that supportive crutch of a document in front of you. Brain laterality, some of the specific features and qualities associated with the two different types, the two different workings of our brain, and so forth. All right, those of you who were class last week and week 2 would have seen, actually you would have only seen the one piece, the how to eat ice cream with the 5 clear steps. This first portion, which, you know, I should almost block over, those would have been the planning steps, because to get it down to the bare bones, you need to know what it is you want to talk about. I gave an example of how you would walk through that, how you make your how to talk wrap up, be presented in 20 to 30 seconds. I did say avoid having any kind of props. Props tend to be a bit problematic. You do need to have that trigger sheet. You do want to have that piece of paper, because that's what you're going to hand in to me so that I can make some comments on it before class in week 4. And that's pretty much the end of this week's presentation. I can tell you that in class in week 3, we're also going to start talking about the group workshops. That's it for now. I will see you in class in week 3.